Hello there, and welcome to Dream Soar with Chuck and Friends, where we turn bold visions into actionable growth. Before I bring on my friends, at the end of the show, after we have a great dialogue, great discourse, great learnings, I will share what many of my people that come to my workshops love are these AI tips that will help them dream and soar on their AI journey. But that's at the end, so stay tuned. So Dream and Soar. As I was socializing this with my colleagues, my friends, my trusted advisors, be it in my networking groups and my Vistage group, the question often came up, Chuck, why Dream and Soar? Where'd that come from? Well, for those of you who are visionaries, who are dreamers, we've learned that dreaming alone only creates great imagery, great images. The soaring part comes from having deep insights that drive the dreamers, the visionaries out there have learned, sometimes painfully, have learned that to really soar, it's those deep insights that lead to effective strategies that can then produce wonderful outcomes with efficient execution. And that's what we at Chief Outsiders do every day for our amazing small mid-market clients. We help them dream and soar, insight, strategy, and amazing execution. But what about the friends part? Well, the friends are my colleagues that I'm bringing on, where they will share their secret sauce, their superpower that they use with their firms, with their companies, with their clients, to help their clients dream and soar. But my friends are also going to be those who I've met over the years with my speaking engagements with Vistage, so maybe other speakers, my networking groups, but also my friends could be someone, could be you, who wants to be part of the show to share what you've done to help others, you know it, dream and soar. So today's show, the first episode of Dream and Soar with Chuck and Friends, we're going to focus on reigniting growth. If what took you to a certain point isn't working anymore, or if you're trying to achieve a new, or you need to achieve a new growth vision, and the things that you are trying aren't working, if you're stuck, if you're not getting that predictable, profitable, organic growth, stay tuned, because the person that's going to help you understand how to accomplish that, who has done that time and time again with companies that are PE backed, requires no introduction, as they say, for PE firms. But I will introduce him to you. My friend, my colleague, Chief Revenue and Chief Strategy Officer with Chief Outsiders, Craig Levinsohn. All right, so Craig, I know you've worked in PE firms. We're going to pick this conversation right up.
All right.
But before we get there, I also know that your son is big into soccer, and he plays on this pretty incredible travel soccer team, and they had this tournament, this big tourney out in Vegas. How'd they do?
They did great, Chuck. Thank you for asking, and thank you for having me join this program. They finished in second place, so we were really thrilled about that, and onward and upward to the next tournament. Chuck, one of the things you asked is, what was my experience, or you cited a lot of my experience in private equity, and I think a little foundational discussion is important. Certainly, my private equity experience is broad, both as a founder and C-suite executive. Several PE firms have invested in my businesses, and we achieved multiple high valuation exits. So I've seen them as an investor. Insight Partners, which some of you might be familiar with, they're one of the nation's largest PE firms. They've appointed me to the boards of several of their portfolio companies to really help drive strategic and scalable growth. And I also serve, as you cited, as a strategic growth advisor at Chief Outsiders, supporting more than 30 private and PE businesses across a variety of industries and sizes. Now, throughout these experiences, I've seen common next phase growth challenges that many PE firms have figured out how to overcome, often helping their portfolio companies achieve predictable and scalable growth. So let me tick off maybe 4 or 5 growth challenges that I'm sure many of the people on this program will relate to. First, I often see a lack of predictable, consistent, and scalable revenue performance. For PE-backed firms, this has a significant impact on valuations and sellability. However, for many of your companies, it may simply just be frustrating and painful to see revenue seesaw back and forth, which likely impacts many of your future growth and investment decisions. So that lack of predictable, consistent, scalable revenue performance is one challenge. A second is really that sales, marketing, and operations teams are not tightly aligned to shared revenue goals, strategies, and initiatives. Often, because of gaps in revenue planning and accountability, these teams work in silos or simply pursue the wrong revenue levers, which adversely impacts execution and ultimately results. A third common challenge that I see is that companies seeking next phase growth and scalability, they often lack prescriptive and actionable playbooks to improve sales rep and marketing performance. The results are really a large variance in performance across sales teams. Some call this the 80-20 rule, where 20% of your reps are doing 80% of your revenue. But too often, reps are simply given a revenue target and told to sink or swim. Good luck to you, rather than being equipped with actionable, detailed, and measurable plans that drive financial success. And finally, the most common challenge I see as well is that companies are experiencing poor win rates in slow sales cycles, primarily due to imprecise targeting and inconsistencies in deal execution. Now, certainly, there are other challenges that are very common for companies seeking next phase growth. The good news, however, is that many PE firms and their portfolio companies have figured out how to address and overcome these challenges, and you can too.
So let's talk about that. You've worked with, as you said, a lot of PE firms, a lot of their companies. You've seen the challenges, the unique opportunities. You've seen the commonalities you just shared with us. So break it down for us, Craig. What specific strategies have you put in place that, not only that have proven successful for these PE firms, but importantly for the folks that are watching, that are listening, that they could take away to help them get unstuck? Share with us, please.
Well, I'm going to go into some detail, and I often find that using real live examples really brings all this home. But several years ago, I created a methodology, a program, and some supporting tools called Profit GPS that PE portfolio companies and non-venture backed companies use to accelerate predictable and scalable growth. It's quite simple to implement and focuses the entire organization on shared revenue goals and the key levers that impact their attainment. The recommendations are both actionable and attainable, and they can be typically achieved in 4 to 6 weeks with some serious impact. So let me walk you through an example. Keep in mind that the inputs we're going to discuss can be entered into the Profit GPS tool for easy calculations. So one of my private equity clients owns several property services businesses, including a commercial painting company that wanted to increase year-over-year revenue from $57 million to $66 million. Now, when they shared this goal, I asked what internal and external factors were considered to arrive at the $66 million target. Their answer was, well, just historical year-over-year growth. Now, that didn't make me feel too comfortable. So to ensure that their goal was achievable, we considered several additional inputs, such as their current pipeline, market demand and trends, competitive intensity, sales capacity, and other relevant factors. Now, while it turned out that with these additional insights, we truly believe they could reach their $66 million revenue plan, we now had a much higher level of confidence that we could do so. So now we have this overall revenue target.
If I can interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
So they were on track to accomplish it after you went through this model. But I imagine you've had the experience, like many of us have, where they have that vision, that goal out there, and they don't really have that. You know, your model would suggest, or their approach would suggest, they don't know how to get there. They're not going to hit that number, and this can be utilized in that scenario as well, right?
Well, there's a couple of aspects to that. The first is that number real, right? Is it attainable? Does the market show you that? Do you have the capacity? Do you have the pipeline that would lead you there? And the second is, how do you actually go about getting it? And so we took that. In their case, we validated the $66 million. We said that, we believe that they can do that this year. The market dynamics are right. But now what we needed to do is we need to break that down into specific, measurable, and trackable revenue goals at a segment level. So in my client's case, we distributed the $66 million revenue target into sector-specific revenue goals that included multifamily, condo HOA, senior living, and national retail. Now, remember, they're a commercial painting company. Those are the segments that they focus on. Now, you may find it useful to break down your own goals by product line or geography or vertical sector or other dimensions. However you do it, this step is critical for driving focused execution and optimizing resources. Yeah. So next, now that we've broken this 66 million into these segment goals, next it was time to identify target deal types within each of these segments. Now, for my client, they had assigned a $12 million revenue goal for the multifamily segment, one of the segments I just referenced. Now, to accommodate deal types, we split that goal into individual revenue targets for new customer acquisition and customer expansion. Now, their targets were $8.5 million of the $12 million from customer expansion and $3.5 million from new customer acquisition. So now we've split this up. We've got an overall goal, we've got a segment goal, and now we've split it up by within each of these segments, what's going to come from our expansion sales to our existing customers versus net new. So with that information, it became easy to estimate the annual deal volume. How many deals do we need to see this year to achieve our goals? And we did this by simply dividing the revenue targets by historical average deal size. So if the average deal size was $100,000 for new customer acquisition, and their goal was $3.5 million, they needed to close 35 deals that year. Now this gave us greater precision to what the marketing, sales, and operations teams would need to generate and support as they plan their strategies and initiatives.
So Craig, you can then break that down to the individual sales rep level as well, can't you?
Well, we will, but there's a couple other factors that we'd want to do before that. So now we have the deal volume. We know what we need to go out and deliver in terms of closed wins. But next, it was time to determine the number of qualified opportunities needed to reach the deal volume goals.
You talk about the funnel now. You're getting to the
funnel. How many opportunities do we need to see to hit that deal volume goal? And to do that, we simply took historical win rates. And so within the multifamily segment that I referenced, my client had a historical win rate of 31%. So we knew that they needed roughly 3 times the number of qualified opportunities to hit their target deal volumes. However, for those listening, if you're like many companies, you might not track exact win rates. So you might be saying, well, what number do I put in? And to get started, it's okay to just estimate that number. But what you're really trying to accomplish is get directionally correct on the number of opportunities you need to be involved in to hit your deal volume goal, to hit your segment revenue goal, to hit your overall revenue goals. Now, finally, this whole sort of with this model, there's one important additional element that you have to do. So we needed to calculate when those opportunities needed to enter the pipeline in order to convert them into revenue within the current fiscal year. So what we did is we took our historical average sales cycle length,
Right.
and we said, in their case, it was 6 months. So we knew that any opportunity coming into the pipeline after July 1st was unlikely to convert in time to impact the current year revenue. So this type of analysis, when do these opportunities need to appear in the pipeline? It's very, very important to sort of assessing your pipeline health at any given time and to reduce surprises that could jeopardize revenue attainment. I've seen this happen a lot where people and companies think their pipeline is robust, but they haven't really looked at their sales cycle length to know whether those are really going to truly convert in the existing fiscal year. So the end of the year, they've missed their number and they said, well, that's okay because our pipeline going into the next year is strong. But for a private equity firm, that's not a comfortable discussion to have.
And if there's seasonality to the business, then even more complicated.
Oh, true. But you're trying to plan for all of this. So, so just to recap, and then I'm going to get in how you actually take this information and turn it into something that's meaningful in your business. But to recap, we set a more precise and confident overall revenue target, right? We broke it down into the key focus segments. We broke that down into revenue by desired deal types, such as new customer acquisition and expansion sales. We used historical average deal sizes to calculate the number of deals required to reach the financial targets. We then used estimated win rates to calculate the number of qualified opportunities required to reach deal volume goals. And finally, we used a historical average length of sale to know when the opportunities needed to enter the pipeline to impact the current fiscal year revenue goals. Now, what did all that work do, right? It tightly aligned all the teams in their strategies and initiatives and resource investments to these shared financial goals. Everyone became part of the revenue and margin team, and the data was captured in an easy tool that automatically calculated much of what we've discussed. So think of this as a foundational revenue and margin playbook, which you're going to then launch some of the things I'm going to talk about next off of.
So then, Craig, you mentioned earlier that if you don't know what your conversion rates are at the various parts of your funnel, estimate them. But then I imagine that as they start tracking and monitoring, they can then update this model.
Absolutely. The model gets better and better when you have better and better data. But what it does do in that case, Chuck, is it highlights the importance of knowing that information. I'll give you just a sidebar. The same client, we had this 31% win ratios. And we looked at that at the end of the year and he said, well, what if that was 34%? What if it was 34%? That translated into $9 million of extra revenue in the year, which would fend off economic headwinds, all sorts of things. And so what we ended up doing is we said, we need to come up with some strategies and initiatives to improve our win ratio year over year because the juice is worth the squeeze. We can get $9 million more in revenue just by improving by 3%. Yeah. So you have to start somewhere. There's a lot of imprecision if you're not measuring this stuff, but you need to put in estimates into the model to get started. And that's what I've seen work really, really well.
Yeah. Go on, please.
So now comes the truly impactful part where how you turn this work into predictable and consistent revenue performance. Again, in the case of my client, they had this 80-20 rule. And, of course, that meant that there were a lot of underperforming and costly reps, making it even more challenging to scale the team effectively as the company grew. Plus, they were struggling, like a lot of companies that I deal with rationalizing their marketing spend and directly tying it to revenue growth. I hear that from CEOs all the time. What's the attribution? I don't know if we should spend more or less in marketing. Is it really contributing to revenue? So in many ways, for my client, this was predictable as they were simply assigning each rep an annual revenue goal and hoping for the best. There was no detailed plans in alignment with marketing. Most reps were given $1 or $1.5 million revenue goal and said, go at it, or you probably won't be here next year. So let me now outline the better approach that comes out of the model we just discussed. And this is an approach that all of my PE firms now use and their portfolio companies use as well. And that's to assign that same $1.5 million revenue target to the rep. Okay, we need that to ladder up to our revenue goals, but also provide a much more prescriptive plan that maps to the broader financial model we just discussed. In this improved case, a sales rep's plan would include the revenue target, the same 1.5 million, a revenue segment focus. So the 1.5 million that rep would work through will come from, say, multifamily, a revenue type. So for that rep's $1.5 million revenue target, we would say 900,000 might come from new customer acquisition and 600,000 would come from expansion sales. They're assigned specific goals for deal volume, much like we calculated in the model, qualified opportunities, and pipeline timing. So they now know at a more granular level what they need to accomplish. Marketing would provide a lot of support in this. So for their new customer acquisition initiatives, marketing would provide named account targets using things like ideal customer profile traits, the names of people on the buying team that they can leverage from places like LinkedIn, lots of additional data. What is their estimated total spend per year on the services that we're providing? The reps would also receive something similar for their expansion accounts. So if a rep is working part expansion accounts and part net new customer acquisition, for the expansion accounts, they'd be provided the customer accounts that they're going to be targeting, what our current share of wallet is of their total spend, what our penetration is in terms of how many buyers at the company are we working with, and how many more should we be working with in the following year. So you're starting to build insights. You're starting to build a connection between marketing and sales, and you're relieving the salesperson from having to spend all their time out prospecting and chasing things that may not even be the target clients that the company wants. So you can see how all of this comes together. And then at the end of the day, the sales managers can start to manage the reps much more effectively. They can have more pertinent discussions, not just about, well, where's your revenue at, but do you have the appropriate deal volume? Do you have the appropriate pipeline and timing? Are you doing the right activities with marketing to achieve success? So all of these things start to build on each other and create a much richer way to go to market, in a much more effective way to go to market. And then lastly, and then I'm gonna stop here, Chuck, is that I cited that example with my client looking at this model that we created with them saying, if I improve 3%, I'll get $9 million more. Right. There's all sorts of things that you can do after you start rolling this out.
All those levers that you have.
All those levers. And how do you pick off ways to improve those? So at the end of the day, my clients, and I've worked with lots of clients, they see generally 5 or 6 improvements as a result of this program. They improve the predictability and consistency in their revenue and margin performance. We talked a lot about that. More sales reps are hitting or exceeding their goals. There's shorter sales cycles and improved win rates for all of the reasons that I cited. We have much, much better forecasting. In my PE clients, they demand that. How do we have more insights into what is going to be happening? So the forecasting gets a whole lot better. Marketing ROI is much stronger because it's lined up with revenue. And you've got this really good sort of cross-functional alignment towards these shared goals. So none of this is really, a lot of what I'm describing is probably common sense to everyone. Why aren't we unpacking revenue and lining teams up against it? But the reality is most companies don't start there. But when they get there, they see profound a profound impact on their business results.
It becomes prescriptive, it becomes predictable, and I imagine those board meetings that these CEOs are in become a lot more productive as well.
Because they're armed with better information, Chuck, to really help people understand where the business is at any given time, and then put in mitigation strategies to offset risk. And
one of the things I really love about this, Craig, you mentioned all these different segments and net new and expansion and different product lines. I imagine you have different sales cycles, you have different conversion rates, you have different factors that when you get this at that granular level, you can build all those differences into the model to take. So it's not just one size fits all. It's really gets down. It can accommodate and have the flexibility.
Some people start with more of that information already known, and others put in placeholders into the model, and then you start working off of it. So it really works for lots of different size companies at different stages of sort of data maturity. But it really works. And I know we're going to bring Shaun in here, who's one of my clients that I've worked with. But Chuck, do you want to introduce Shaun into the equation?
This is a great time to do that. Thanks for that. Thanks for the segue, Craig.
Yeah, pleasure.
So, we do one of the features about this show that I think makes it really special. It's not bringing on a friend, which I love to do, but above and beyond that, it's also having that friend bring somebody on who they have experience with, who has experience with them. So it's not just, hey, here's what we do, but then also the validation comes as well. And so what a longstanding client of Craig's, great guy, he is the president and chief strategy officer for Concord Servicing. And let me do a few hocus pocus here. There we go. Concord Servicing. And I love this, Shaun. I'm going to bring you on out of the green room in just a minute. You have to put down those M&Ms. Loan servicing so good, it'll blow your socks off. Love that. Love that. So without further ado, let me bring on Shaun O'Neill, President and Chief Strategy Officer of Concord Servicing. Shaun, thank you for joining us.
Yep. Hey, nice to see you again, Chuck. And hey, Craig, always great to see you as well.
And before we get into it, a quick congratulations. You recently closed on a sale, didn't you?
Yeah, we actually, in December, we transacted from our first PE group, which is how I got introduced to Craig. Company was called Inverness Graham, exited in December, and now we're partnered with GTCR out of Chicago. So yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Congratulations, and Craig, for the role you helped play with that. Congratulations to you and the overall team. Shaun, where I'd love to start, if you could, take us back to when you were trying to get to that next phase of growth and the challenges that you were facing that were the inhibitors, if you will, to achieving very aggressive revenue and margin goals, and what led to you getting involved with Chief Outsiders and bringing Craig in, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I would just comment real quick that, where Craig was going is that we're in that journey right now. We're starting to leverage a lot of that stuff and all that foundational information. But to a large extent, we were a founder-controlled, privately owned company. We're a third-party servicer, so we don't originate assets and we don't own assets. We work as a business process outsourcer for those kinds of companies and consumer assets. And we had a variety of segments that we are in. And, obviously, when we get acquired by PE, there's an expectation of steady revenue growth, right? And just use a number, 15% growth. There's a projection to get there over the next 4 to 5 years. They have an exit strategy. Craig came in and started asking some very foundational, basic questions. What markets are you in? What's your right to win? What's the competition look like? Are the markets growing equally? What's your market share in all those markets? Is the ideal customer profile equal in each market? Are the products and services that you deliver to those markets unique, or, are they the same, or are they different? Things around Is there white space? What products and services are you delivering to some clients that you're not to the other? So it's really just a foundational conversation about what we were doing. And I think that was a different approach to what historically had been. We've been very successful company for almost 30 years or over 30 years. We built our company around relationships. So, and because we were privately held, revenue growth was nice but it wasn't required, and so we were able to be flexible and have good years and bad years. But really in a PE world, and it's about predictability. It's about predictability in growth and predictability in profitability. And I think that's what Craig really said, let's stop and take a look at that first.
Brilliant.
And Shaun, just as you and I worked together on this, and I talked a little bit about a model. We worked a lot on that, how we really deconstructed, revenue so that the entire organization could line up around it. Can you talk a little bit about just that and just, in the value that you see in it now as you're scaling the business to the next level of growth?
Yeah. And to that point, revenue is now an organizational goal. It's not just a sales goal where we're out there, and we were a small company and small sales, but to align this revenue growth and what that meant to the organization, not only from a marketing perspective, but from an operational support perspective, to be able to say, what do these deals look like for us? We evaluated again, I talked about ideal customer profile. How do we get to those goals, right? How do we get to those, that 15% growth? Craig talked about identifying pipeline, identifying average deal size and cycle. That needed to be aligned with the operational people, because depending on the size of those transactions, what's our capacity today? Is our capacity able to absorb this growth that we're predicting, right? So it's not just about hitting 15% revenue growth, but does the organization have the ability to support it? Because if you don't, then you're selling and you're bringing on business, and that doesn't achieve growth. That doesn't achieve your success, because then you have reputational risk and you're not delivering, especially when we support loan portfolios. It's about portfolio performance. So aligning sales goals with operational capacity and that operational growth is key. And that's a core part of our planning process today that Craig brought to the table.
And I think that's such an important point, Shaun, because this isn't just a sales and marketing initiative. Yeah. The organization performs so much better when other people have line of sight into what you're trying to accomplish in your revenue. They can be more planful. They can staff and resource more appropriately with the right people, with the right competencies. That's a lot of what this kind of, materializes into, and what I think you're just speaking about, that it's really a more holistic way for the organization to line up around what we're trying to accomplish.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and one of the things that Craig also, I mentioned margin, and we have different businesses as a servicing company. And we do third-party collections as well. So there's different dynamics of those particular assets. And really, as we laid out a plan in our first year of looking at how we were going to achieve our growth, we looked at these certain markets and segments, and we looked at margin too, because it's not just about 15% growth on the top line. You want to grow that bottom line and maintain or improve margin, right? So how do you do that? If there are certain products and services that are better margin, you've got a different approach to that. And again, that goes back to this cross-sell opportunity as well. As if you've got large margin or very good margin products and you're not selling them, how do you work with the existing part of the organization? And it may not be the sales team. It may be the operational or account executive structure that Craig and that talked to us about. So sales is out there really focused on maybe it's new logos and supporting it. Do you have an organizational structure, account executive structure that really focuses on that cross-sell or upsell, white space opportunity that the sales team may work with, because the salesperson brought that logo on, but it becomes this organization of how do we achieve growth with our existing logos, and how do we identify new logos and have those. And so you might even have sales organizations that are separate from that. Salespeople are just focused on new logos, and other salespeople are supportive of the existing organic growth that you can get from your book of business. And that's this type of insights that I think Craig brought to the organization that is we continue to evolve with. As he said, it's about evolution, and the more you do it, the more data, the better you can become.
And it becomes foundational, right, Shaun? That's what you're really trying to do, and it scales with the businesses. You have very ambitious goals for where your company's going to, and you really need to go from one phase of growth to the next with different processes, different things in place. And it's never too early to start this journey. Shaun, any parting words for the listeners? You've done a great job of just kind of covering your journey. Any other like small tidbits or insights that they can take away from this before we
I think, Craig, you touched on it. It almost sounds very common sense, but I don't think that just, I think trust in the process. There's a lot of information that you have within your organization. It's worth the time to take a look at what Craig did and what we did. Take a look at what you've got and where you want to go. So really, and break it down. Sometimes we're so focused on that one goal that we don't really understand how we can get there. So I think take the opportunity to break it down. And Craig's approach was very, very organized, very structured. And like I said, it was just very common sense approach to what we're doing. And then you just layer it across the organization. I think that would be my recommendation or my suggestion around this.
Thank you. Let me build on that and build on Craig's question. So from your experience, what you've gone through, how about the rest of the organization? I mean, you bought into it, obviously, but what about the other key parts of the organization? How to bring them along and get them in alignment and on board and supportive of this transformation?
Well, part of it too, Craig mentioned the expectation of your PE firm. So for us, that aligned with them. So then all of a sudden, so you've got the support at the top that comes in. So when you're having quarterly meetings, your quarterly board meetings, or we have monthly executive meetings, it's about socializing the idea and seeing the value. And as you start to go through the journey, people start to buy into it. I mean, we didn't have a big resistance to it. I think we had in our organization, a lot of people understood. I will say we transitioned from a founder-controlled business to a PE owned. So there was some changes within the organization, but getting the right people at the table is important. So finding those right people, but socializing the idea and then continue to communicating the value. And again, results at the end of the day are the best thing to show. And the results that we have seen and we continue to see and what we see us going forward are a big part of our work with Craig.
Thank you, Shaun. Appreciate that.
Thank you. So the first step for those out there that are looking to ignite, Shaun, what would you say step one would be for them?
Well, I'd say, get Craig's email, give him a call.
I didn't even set you up like
Thank you. Well, thank you.
I don't know. That was easy. Man. No.
Okay. Shaun, thank you for sharing and for trusting in us. And we love being your partner on this journey. Any final thoughts from you?
No, again, I think I've shared enough. I mean, I think we've enjoyed working with Craig, and I will say again, I've used the word a couple of times, but again, the foundational stuff that we worked on over the past couple of years is really part of what we do. And Chuck, you said it before, I think, and maybe when we were talking earlier in preparation, is this a repeatable process, and it gets better over time. So like anything, the first time around, you look at it and you reevaluate it, but as it's a repeatable process, the model gets better, it gets fine tuned, and the predictability gets stronger and it's a lot more reliable. So I just think that's really my comments.
Yeah.
And transferable to other industries as well?
Well, from my perspective, we're a loan servicing company. Craig used as an example a commercial painting company. I think it's applicable in any line of business.
Agnostic, yeah. Craig?
So Chuck, I think because I know we're kind of getting near the end here. I would encourage people if this stuff sounds like it would be useful in supporting your company's growth goals, schedule a 30-minute call with me. It's complimentary. I think Chuck can put up a Calendly link or my phone number, and then we can kind of go through this, and you can see whether it would make sense to introduce some of these concepts into your business. I oftentimes, I said that this can really take 4 to 6 weeks to really put some of this in play. It often starts with a combination of an online assessment and then a one-on-one calls with you or your teams. And then I start to build this out, and I build priority recommendations, and I provide all the frameworks and tools to the point that you can start to pull this together with your existing team, or I can support this, and help you accelerate your growth faster. But either way, this is really proven stuff. This is stuff that, oftentimes private companies who aren't part of some of these PE portfolios, they don't see some of these best practices. And I've been around long enough to know that, putting some of these foundational pieces in place really makes an order of magnitude difference in business results.
You've proven that time and time again, Craig. Thank you. Shaun, thank you for joining us. Craig, thank you for sharing what has and will continue to be a very successful pathway for many. And thank you both for being the first friends.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Stay tuned, people. We're going to go to
Craig.
the AI
Thank you,
tip right now. Thanks, Shaun. Thanks, Craig. Okay, that was fantastic. And that's just the start. So now, as I promised, an AI tip. So as I go around the country and I have these hands-on experiential workshops for CEOs, founders, business executives, as they start getting their hands dirty, they start working in AI in very practical manner. Invariably, the number one complaint that I hear is they're starting to experience this, especially with a ChatGPT kind of an engine, is they're writing, let's say they're writing an email using chat to help them out. The number one complaint, that's not how I would say it. And when ChatGPT first came on the scene a couple of years ago, you had to constantly, with every prompt, you had to direct ChatGPT how you want to be said, whether it's brevity, whether it is with some level of humor, whatever it is that you wanted, you had to direct it. Well, what if ChatGPT could understand and know your voice, your brand voice, your company's voice? What if it could remember that and incorporate that in every response that it produces? That would be pretty special. And that's what ChatGPT has recently come out with. And I'm going to share with you how you do that. First of all, you might have noticed in ChatGPT, there's a colored circle with 2 letters. In my case, it's CH for Chuck. And it's not just there for show. If you click on it, it actually will open up a dialog box, a menu of items that you can choose from. Much like those 3 bars, many people call those the hamburger. You see on many websites, you click on the 3 bars, the hamburger, it opens up a menu. Same thing here with that colored circle. We're not going to go through all of these options here, but one of them is customize ChatGPT. And if you click on that, it'll open up a new dialog box that now, and they've just in the last week or so, they've expanded what you can do here. You can now put in your persona, your voice, and there are multiple, there are actually 4 ways you do this. First, the first question is, what should ChatGPT call you? And you can instruct it to call you anything. I just choose Chuck personally for me. The next question is, what do you do? So you can be literal. I'm a chief marketing officer, a chief area manager. I'm the CEO of this company, whatever it might be, or you can be figurative. So I actually put in, I help companies and people dream and soar. You probably knew that was coming. The third area you can customize, the question is, what traits should ChatGPT have? And then they list several options down below that you can just click on. But here is where you can put in your voice. And if you don't know what your traits are that you want, you can actually upload some of your emails, some of your writings into ChatGPT and ask Chat, what are my traits? And that can help you then copy paste into here. Or if you want to put them in here directly, you want to be concise, you want to have a lot of humor, a little humor, you want to speak like an engineer, speak like a lawyer, whatever it might be that you want those traits to be, you would type them in here, and that will know and then Chat will know your voice. And then lastly, it's the catch-all. Anything else, ChatGPT should know about you. So this can be personal. I'm an avid skier. You talk about your family, talk about a trip you recently went on. Whatever you would want ChatGPT to know and be able to reference for how it responds to you, this is where you would put that in. And then all importantly, enable and save. Make sure that you click both of those. Now, enable, why would it have an enable button? Well, the reason is sometimes you might want ChatGPT to respond to you, not in your persona, but just in general. And so you could go in here, you can turn off enable, then have your dialogue, have your conversation with ChatGPT. When you're ready for ChatGPT to utilize your persona, you would put enable back on. You make any changes, make sure you click the save. So that is your tip of the day. And if you would like to me in to your firm or your organization to do a 3-hour hands-on workshop on AI, getting dirty, let me know. I'd be delighted to work with you. The next time we'll talk about projects, by the way, a very powerful new tool, relatively new tool within ChatGPT. Until then, my friends, my new friends, dream and soar.